Thank you. Good evening, members of the public. Welcome to this new municipal year and our meeting of the North Western Area Planning Committee held today, Wednesday, 18th of May 22. There are just a few notices, which I don't have written down, but the first is we are being live recorded and we are also being live streamed. So would you please be very careful about the use of your microphones, have them turned on only when you're speaking and not when you aren't. That would be very helpful. If you're making a comment, making a reference to the papers, would you please give reference to use a page number or a paragraph number as a reference. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else except that the fire exit, should we need it, is there. And there are some other notices on the agenda that if you could please take notice of that. Next item of business is apologies for absence. Miss Bird, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies received from Councillor Doran. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Third item is the minutes of the last meeting, pages 7 to 10 on your papers. Can I take those as read, please, members? Is that an okay as read? You haven't read them. You have read them. Don't worry, next point. Does anyone have any points of accuracy they'd like to raise? So, Councillor Stevens does, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On page 8, at the very bottom, the last item on page 8, which now isn't moving on my screen, it refers to flooding here, and certainly we did talk about flooding. It says flooding and surface water concerns. The issue that was really being raised was about flooding from sea level rise. That's the concern, not surface water flooding. And it's really important that members do understand this, that surface water flooding may be dealt with by a SUD scheme, but sea level rises can't be. So that's really what that minute was about. And in general, I would say that those bullet points at the bottom of page 8 do cover the subjects that were discussed, but they don't give the answers that were given. So now, if you want to know what the answers were, you've got to go back to the recording. And I haven't had time to do that before this meeting, so I actually don't remember one of those answers. And I think that the answers should be given in minutes.
That is the nature of minutes, especially of planning meetings, that we give, you know, the decisions and the reasons for them rather than the whole discussion around it for lots of reasons. So I'm afraid the answer is yes, we do have to go back to the recording. But I certainly remember that being discussed, the risk of tidal flooding, and that both indeed were an issue, surface and tidal. So does everyone else, or does anyone disagree? And are you happy to include that in the minutes?
I agree. I remember the discussion around tidal.
Okay, well, no one disagrees with that. I'm not surprised because I remember it. I hope that's right. So, Miss Bird, are you all right to make that amendment?
Yes, we can add that in.
Thank you very much. Okay. So, where are we? So, next item, I think, is disclosure. Oh, no, we have to agree them. I'm sorry. You're there ahead of me. I'm sorry. Thank you, Miss Bird. Members, can we agree those with that amendment from Councillor Stevens? Can we agree those by assent? Anybody unhappy? No, thank you. The minutes are agreed by assent. Thank you. Now, item 4 is disclosure of interest, and I have to read this, sorry. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests, or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8 inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members, and members are reminded they're also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the need arise through the meeting. Any takers? Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. A non-pecuniary as a member of Essex County Council who are consultees. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, thank you very much. So item 5 is the first planning item of business, which is for Birchwood Farm Clarks. We'll have the presentation. Sorry, Councillor Siddle.
Thank you. I just have a query on the Walden House Road application. At the last time that came to this committee, Councillor Keyes declared a pecuniary interest and left the meeting for that item. he hasn't done so this time. I just want to know whether the pecuniary interest has disappeared or not.
It's a fair question,
I
Councillor
didn't leave
Keys.
the meeting, Richard. No, that was for the one down Catchpole Lane. Didn't.
Well, I don't remember, and I'm not going to referee
the one by the
between
pumping
you.
station, which was Andy Marvin's.
Okay.
I left for that one, not for the one by the school.
Okay. In any case, you know, the decision is for the member, and not for, it's really not up for discussion, to be honest, unless the member in question wishes to raise it and ask anyone's view. But you have reminded me, Councillor, and I'm grateful for that. We have an update, members, which is particularly important that you have looked at that for the last item for Hall Road, because it's a different recommendation. So please make sure you've looked at that before we get there. The recommendation in the main papers, I think, is actually a clerical error by somebody. So, sorry, back to business. We have Birchwood Farm, Clerks, have a presentation from the planning officer, and then following that we have 2 members of the public to speak. So, presentation, please, if we could.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. So this is an application for proposed erection of a new storage building for storage of packaging and equipment for Walden Oyster Company at Birchwood Farm, Birchwood Road and Clerks. I just want to firstly draw members' attention to the members' update, which recommends a slightly amended version or wording to condition 16. Which hopefully is self-explanatory, and also a correction of the name of the applicant. It's not Mr. and Mrs. Means, it's Mr. and Mrs. Eames. Okay. So this is the application site, which in red hatching. So we've got Birchwood Farm, existing buildings here, Birchwood Road along here, and Chimney Pot Lane down the western boundary. The nearest residential property not associated with Birchwood Farm is this property. Yeah. Again, another location plan showing the location of the application site. The blue line outlining the other land and buildings associated with Birchwood Farm, and also shows the site access point from Birchwood Road down the bottom there. An aerial view showing again it's the same plan basically, but the new building would go in this location here, and again it shows the existing buildings, and this building here was approved in 2019 but has now been built. So this is the existing site plan. Sorry, it's turned around 90 degrees. So we've got Birchwood Road down this side with site access, the 3 existing buildings associated with Walden Oyster Company, other buildings associated with Birchwood Farm, and this is another building which is not associated with the Oyster Company, that has recently been completed. It was going to be for Walden Brewery, but has since changed to be more general use. And then we've got, this is the site for the new building. So that shows the new building in position. And then we've got elevations of the proposed building and a street scene along Chimney Pot Lane. So you can't really see the new building because it's in front of one of the existing buildings. Actually, that's what I included on there. So that's the elevations of this building here, which is the newest building on the site. And then these are the elevations of the proposed building. So obviously very similar in appearance, but smaller. Floor plans. It's just a big open floor space for storage. And some site photos. So that's taken from the newest building I referred to earlier, looking towards Chimney Pot Lane. The new building will go in approximately this position here. These are photos, that photo of access from Birchwood Road, and that's a photo of one of the existing buildings associated with the Oyster Company. And Councillor Fleming also asked for photos of the other access to the site from Chimney Pot Lane, existing access Thank you. So the application has been assessed, and officers concluded that the development would benefit the rural economy, supporting the existing Malden Oyster Company, which makes a positive contribution to the district's economy, including tourism. It would have a degree of adverse impact on the rural character and appearance of the site, but this impact would not be significant, especially if additional landscaping is provided. The proposal would be served by adequate parking and access and will not have an adverse impact on ecological interests or the amenity of local residents. Having assessed the development, it considered the economic benefits outweigh the limited adverse visual impacts, and it's therefore recommended that plan permission is granted subject to conditions as set out in your agenda papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so now we move to our public speakers. We have an objector first. Mr. Stokes, are you here? Thank you. Please come forward, take any seat you feel comfortable with on the outer ring there. Make yourself comfortable. Please turn the microphone on and use that. You have, just getting the timer up, are we, ladies? Please bear with us while we get the timer up. When we do, we will start to time you when you begin to speak, and you have 2 minutes precisely.
Excuse me, before I speak, can I just question something on the actual planning application form itself, which I think is incorrect.
I'm not quite sure why that's happening here and didn't happen with the officers early, but yes,
Well,
very
it's just,
briefly, please.
It's just, yeah, sorry, just very, very briefly. On section 20, which is industrial or commercial processes and machinery, there's a question which says, does this proposal involve the carrying out of industrial or commercial activities and processes? And it's been answered no, which seems odd to me because it's business, isn't it? So
That
just
does
wanted to
seem
clarify that
well-meant.
point.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Noted. Thank you. Okay, we have our 2-minute timer, and I am very, very precise. I'll stop you mid-word, I'm afraid, if I have to. Off you go.
I'll talk quick then. I would like to draw your attention to a nearby planning application and the reason for refusal, 19/00241 full, which was a new proposal for a 4-bedroom house adjacent to Syringa Cottage on Chimney Lane. The comments from Purley Parish Council were, we recommend the refusal of planning permission for the reasons given below. The proposed dwelling, due to its size and scale, will be overly dominant in a rural street scene, contrary to policy of Malden District Council Local Development Plan 2014-2029. Point 2, such a large property, if permitted, remote from community services and essential support facilities and inaccessible by a range of transport, will represent an unsustainable form of development. As such, the proposal is contrary to national planning policy, presumption in favour of sustainable development, and policies S1 and S8 of the Local Development Plan. It was formally refused with the following text. The proposed development, by virtue of the positioning and scale of the development, would have a detrimental impact on the semi-rural character and appearance of the application site and become a dominating and prominent feature of the street scene, thereby eroding the character of Chimney Pot Lane. The proposal was therefore unacceptable and contrary to policies S1, S8, D1 and H4 of the Malden Local Development Plan and the guidance contained within the National Planning Policy Framework. In summary, both Purley Parish Council and Malden District Council have objected in the recent past to a much smaller, less obtrusive development in the very near vicinity on Chimney Lane. Either these reasons are still applicable, in which case permission for the proposal should be similarly refused, or the reasons are no longer applicable. All I'm asking for is consistency. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very well timed. And our second speaker is the applicant, Mr. Emmons. Please make sure I'm right. I've got it right. Okay, same rules. We'll have the timer starting as soon as you begin to speak, and you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Right, good evening. I'm Richard Emmons, the Malden Oyster Company. We've made a planning application for a new building for the storage of shellfish packaging on our site at Birchwood Farm. The Malden Oyster Company has been purifying and packaging oysters at Birchwood Farm since 2003, and we have grown significantly in this time. In the past year, Malden Oyster Company has seen unprecedented growth and sales have doubled. There's been an increase in the demand for shellfish, which are now less readily available from the EU, and the company has benefited from an increased market share. The specialist nature of our business means that there are very few suppliers of the packaging required, and there are none in the UK. As a result, it has to be ordered well in advance. That the existing supply issues relating to the supply of this packaging have been compounded by Brexit, and this has led to an increase of more than double the amount of storage we need over the last 18 months. This, along with the doubling of production, has resulted in the company running out of space for essential packaging materials. The proposed building is therefore essential to the continuation of our business and is directly linked to the existing processing facility on the site at Birchwood. Therefore, it could not be practically located anywhere else. The design of the building is in keeping with the existing buildings on site. It has been sited sensitively in close proximity to the existing building in order to minimise any impact on the landscape, whilst achieving most practical siting for the business operation. Additional planting is proposed, which will serve a minimum impact. There's no material increase in movements to and from the site, and the heavy goods vehicles will use the access of Birchwood Road. We are proud of the name we've built up over the years, which bears the name Walden within its brand, and the product is available globally. This proposal will enable us to continue our business continuity. Blimey. Thank you.
You even got the last word in. Thank you. Right, members, I suggest we have a discussion about this. If you have any questions for any of the officers, any comments you wish to make, and I hope that out of that comes a proposal complete with reasons for whatever you are proposing, and we'll take a debate from there. Thank you. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask Miss Matthews, this came up at Purley Parish Council recently, was the use of Chimney Pot Lane HGV usage. I just wanted to ask Miss Matthews whether it's possible to condition that HGVs do use the Birchwood Farm main entrance and don't actually use that side access onto Chimney Pot, because it is that particular lane is used frequently by horse riders, ramblers, and it is very, very narrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. A condition like that could be imposed. The only issues that I can think of is that, in terms of enforceability, might be difficult. And there's also sometimes an issue with HGVs about are the HGVs associated with Birchwood Farm, or are they associated with some other use nearby, another farm, agricultural HGV, or some delivery driver who's gone the wrong way, and wouldn't want Birchwood Farm sort of blamed for HGVs that aren't anything to do with them. Another option I was thinking about after receiving your email is, and I've done it somewhere else, not in this district, is requiring signs to be put up. Perhaps at the entrance to Chimney Pot Lane saying no access for HGV for Birchwood Farm, or a sign saying this is not the access to Birchwood Farm, please go a different way. The wording of the sign and the position, the best position for it could be discussed as part of complying with the condition, but that was one option I was thinking. And on the back of yours, I know you mentioned that you'd applied for a sign saying no sort of official highway road sign, but there may be some other, perhaps less formal way of doing it to discourage HGV drivers even trying to get down Chimney Pot Lane and going the way they should be going.
Thank you, Chair. Can I come back? At the urging of the Parish Council, I have put in a local highways panel request for a weight restriction on that road, but as panel members know, it's not the fastest process, so at some time in 2030 that might happen. So I think maybe could we do an informative where I don't know how it would fit with you sort of suggested signs, but I mean, would that need planning permission, or I don't know? Highways, yeah.
Through you, Chairman, the sign wouldn't. I wasn't thinking the sign would be on the highway. Obviously, Birchwood Farm has got a boundary along here with the highway. So I wasn't thinking of a sign in the highway or causing issues for highways. It would be on Birchwood Farm land. I don't know. I mean, it's nothing I've discussed with the applicant, but on this corner here, for example, there could be a sign, some sort of sign, trying to direct drivers to the main access, which is here, and discouraging people trying to turn up there. It wouldn't be necessarily stop all incidents occurring, but it may help and may help. Because one thing I did notice was the entrance to, I think I've got a photo of it. In terms of the sign about where the entrance is, it's not that obvious. I mean, I'm not saying that they need an enormous sign, but you don't see the sign until you get to the entrance, by which time you've already gone past Chimney Pot Lane. So, but I think there is scope there for some sign on their property to make the access point to Birchwood Farm for HGVs more obvious than it is now.
Sorry for jumping in, but is there a similar sign the other side of the entrance that we can't see on that photo?
Not that I remember, no. I think it's just
But
that
perhaps
one.
there could be.
There could be, but I think that this is the sign that you would see
That's the one you want
coming
for
along
this issue.
Birchwood Road. So that sign is here. So that is the sign that you would see coming along Birchwood Road. So a sign on the other side probably wouldn't be very much help, because the HGVs probably aren't coming in from that direction.
I suppose it's an obvious question. How is this in context of the rest of the site? There's existing operations on the site. Do I assume, I don't know, but do I assume there are existing heavy goods vehicles using the site? It'd be difficult and probably unreasonable to then be impose any condition. And I'm not saying you're saying that now, because you're also asking about informative, but just to sort of underline a planning condition that would not be reasonable in context of that development. It's probably just an informative, which isn't anything that we could enforce. The applicant is clearly here, would be aware of the various issues and being good neighbourly, and that's probably the best we can get in that sense. Had this been obviously a brand new application, nothing there, then that's a completely different matter. And then we'd be talking about highways, highway safety, road audits, all these sorts of matters.
Fair enough. And the applicant did suggest that they would intend to only use that entrance. Anyway, I have councillors Keys, White and Morley all in a row. Councillor Keys first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very against being an ex-haulage operator and also heavily involved with lorries, which I do on a day-to-day business now, putting weight limits on these country roads. I understand some of them, but I think probably Councillor Fleming's very aware that probably 90% of farms are all on unsuitable roads for 44-tonne vehicles. Now, 25 years ago, I run in there when it was a Essex Tractors, I believe is what it was called, and there was heavy low loaders going in there, which are a lot smaller than what we'll be running in there with a few oyster nets and paraphernalia. And I think, as the applicant just said, there is no one in the UK doing that. And if you buy an HGV now, which is pretty similar to a car, you cannot get an HGV now without satellite navigation, and that will take you the shortest and the quickest route. And these vehicles coming over from the continent will not be able to determine what the weight limit is, even if it sends them down there. And with these, it is I can't remember his name, sorry, Michael said, it is a hell of a job to enforce that, whether that's one of Councillor Moore's skip lorries going down there to take away some used nets, or to go in there to pick up some rubbish from somewhere else. It is a heck of a job to put that, and I don't support putting weight limits on these country roads. I'm sorry.
Okay. That to be accurate isn't related to this planning application. That's related to an application made by, well, Purley Parish Council, which is, yeah. I hear what you're saying. I think you need to tell your county councillor it's on the local highways panel. Thanks for that. Councillor White?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've just been researching a few things while I've been here, and as far as I'm aware, with weight limits, they don't apply if it's for access only. So if you're going to access a place, it doesn't. You can put whatever weight limit you like on, and it doesn't apply. What is good, I used to get lots of complaints about lorries running over the verges, and I'm really pleased that we don't get any more of those, or I haven't had any more recently. So that's a really good plus sign. The objector raised the planning application in 2019 for the land adjacent to Syringa. And I've actually looked at that, and it was refused on delegated powers because I thought I wasn't aware too much of what it was. So it had nothing to do with members. And it refused on a few reasons. One was because it was very prominent and had a very forward position in the street scene. And the Syringa, I presume it's Syringa, but it might be another house, had permission in the applicant's ownership, had permission to extend it into a 2-storey, I think, so I've only just glanced at it. And that wasn't carried out. And I think the appeal inspector put a weight on that. So I think there were a few issues why it got refused. And they actually mentioned the brewery and said that the brewery had a different planning use. The only thing I would say, although it's always depressing when you can't get planning for a small house or a cottage, I know what that's like. You can always try again. And I think that what happens to the planning inspectorate, which is why this would end up, I think, being approved at appeal, is because they say that the balance between harm and benefit, and the benefit to the local economy and jobs, etc. I mean, I against a lot of hostility, I supported the brewery, and that was a pretty hairy meeting because we need jobs for our young people. They have to get a job somewhere. So for me, I really sympathise with the applicant. I think the objector. I think there are a few problems with their last application which could have been addressed, but it's not in our hands at all. But just the differences between why the things occurred. And also, this is a committee meeting. Any planning application can be called to committee, and ordinary members of the public like us decide them. And for me, on the balance, I think the support of a business, the support for jobs is really important. And I think that's why I personally support this application. I do think if, as members, we had a word with the applicants, they may consider putting up a sign. I mean, I think you can have a metre square before you need planning permission. It's 1.2 metres square. I can't remember the exact size. It might help. The drivers might take notice. They might not. But we can certainly try and see if the applicants can do that. So for me, I think that I would support this application. And I'd like to make that a proposal if I get any seconders.
Okay, well, that's the officer recommendation, so that's fine. I mean, one thing before I go to you, Councillor Morley, we can't ask any applicant to have any control over the highways, what happens on the highways, because they don't know. No, I hear what you're saying. That's what I'm saying. We can't enforce anything on highways. But the applicant
agree, yes.
expressed himself willing to do whatever he can.
Exactly, yes.
And I would like to think if we put an informative on, then he would do whatever he could to be neighbourly. I also potentially have a question for Mr. Johnson about weighing the balance between economy and other policies, but I'm going to go to Councillor Morley because he's waited very patiently for a long time.
No, that's all right. Councillor Keyes brought up various points that I was going to make. Yes, some of these businesses, that they do actually use an informative. I mean, the Jam Factory do. Please use next entrance and things like that. But apart from that, the way Walden's expanding, I think this is going to happen anyway. With businesses need to expand to keep up with demand and local jobs. I just think that's the way forward at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Siddle?
Thank you, Chair. I would have thought the parish council is probably concerned about vehicles coming up Chimney Pot Lane rather than turning down it on the way to the, so going that way in terms of that diagram there. It would be very difficult to stop vehicles coming that way, but I would have thought that's, rather than vehicles turning left, I would have thought it was the ones coming up that might have gone in the wrong direction. Did the applicant think about using a different area on the site? Because it's quite a large site and they seem to have chosen a location which is right next to Chimney Pot Lane. And what is the screening that's going to be put there in terms of making sure it's not that visible from the road? So, is there an opportunity to explore where it might go on that site, or is this where it's going to be? Because I can see that there would be a concern about the street scene on Chimney Pot Lane. It's a rural area. When you've got to those particular location on the map, you've gone past the houses, so you are building more business and large buildings in a rural location. I can understand what the officers say in terms of the need for employment, and we've got to support that. But it's trying to get that balance right. And are we getting the balance right on this application?
Thank you. All I can say to that is we can only look at the application we've got, as I know you know, I'm preaching to the converted here. Could I ask one of you officers, please, about the screening? What's proposed, or is that to be submitted for approval? And if it isn't, can we make it so?
Condition 5 asks for details of hard and soft landscaping to be approved. So it would be, the details of that would be dealt with through there. But perhaps worth mentioning that there is an existing hedge along Chimney Pot Lane. So obviously it doesn't go across the access. I don't know whether the photos. Yeah, so there is some existing vegetation.
Let it grow.
Let it grow. Let it grow. But there's certainly and there is a condition there to consider whether there's any opportunities for enhancing what's there or adding extra along any of the other boundaries.
Councillor Sidley, want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I think we need to tighten that condition up completely, and that there is some kind of stipulation about what a height of the screening, because at the moment that's not acceptable. The building is going to be far too visible, so we need to ensure that any conditions are that the screening is at a certain height, because it is going to impact on the rural location.
Ms Matthews, I'm not sure if we even
Through Chairman, that wouldn't be out for fencing and solid medium closure. You can specify a height, but where it's vegetation and plants grow, and then it would be very difficult to require a minimum height of a hedge. I've never known that being done, and I think that was for good reason, that it would be unreasonable and very difficult to. Sorry, again?
Are we doing that in Cambridge, on the Cambridge Garden Village, specifying the type of vegetation and height and planting of trees rather than hedges?
You can. I'm not familiar with that development, but you can ask for minimum size plants to be planted. So in some cases, you can ask for perhaps more mature specimens to be planted than others, so they make an impact sooner. But in terms of sort of the long term, requiring a hedge or vegetation to be kept at a minimum height, I'm not aware that was something that we could ask for, but maybe Mr. Johnson would know. He's shaking his head. So yeah.
I think
And there's a general constraint, like within 5 years, we can try and manage for those that dead, dying, that sort of stuff to be replaced. And we could probably try and insist on as is, but sort of beyond that, on a longer term, because obviously.
But it's the hands of God. I know, but there's a difference between saying planting a hedge and planting trees.
there is.
So surely we can stipulate as part of the conditions that trees are planted and mature trees are planted as a form of screening.
Well, through your Chairman, then yes, what is planted can be controlled in terms of whether it's trees or hedges and how big the trees are, how dense the hedge planting is, so that, and we can get advice, and we would get advice on the details that came in from our tree consultant to make sure that there were the right sort of species for the site, and the planting and the maintenance that they're proposing to do was acceptable and maximises the impact or the benefit of the screening planting that was going to be carried out. So we can planting, we sort of make sure that it's set off and starts well, and is as Mr. Johnson says, is maintained like that for at least 5 years. But beyond that, then planning powers do fade away in terms of the planting, unless the trees are preserved, TPO'd, and then hedges do have a certain level of protection through the hedgerows regulation. But that's what we would be then relying on beyond that 5-year period. But
So I would like to put forward a condition on the recommendation that trees are planted as part of the screening. I remember on Moat Lane, we had the situation recently where there was an orchard planted, and that was part of the conditions. So what I'd like to see is, as the conditions, obviously leave it to officers, but we see things like specified oak, sycamore, willow, birch, whatever. But it's specified that they are trees that are planted as a screening method, and that we use traditional British trees in terms of that.
But the condition can be so adapted.
That, yes, of course, if you want a big hedge quickly, it's leyland eye here, we can't. So, right, you've had your last go on this rally. I've lost track of who was next, but I'll go with the ladies.
I think Councillor White was next, but I just wanted to follow on about the landscaping. I take Miss Matthews' point that you can't specify the height of the hedge, but actually I think usually what's done is they actually specify the depth of the planting, which is how you control it. I think that's what planners do. Thank you. So that's another way round it, is you say we must have a bundle of planting so many metres depth. Anyway, just a suggestion. But I think the tree suggestion works equally well. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I just wanted to raise that Corporation Farm, which is along the main road, Hackman's Lane, they've got some massive buildings there. I think Plant Pack use them. And they've got a fabulous laurel hedge. Now, I know the council, for some reason, doesn't like laurel hedges, but you cannot see anything through that hedge. It must be 20 foot high, and it's absolutely brilliant. It screens every part of that site, every part of the buildings. Why don't we specify a laurel hedge like that one? Then nobody will see anything all year through, because although the council likes native trees, that's all well and good in the summer, but in the winter they lose all their leaves. So if you really want the screen, go laurel. I mean, go and have a look at the one at Corporation Farm. You know, and you'll see it's huge and it's brilliant. You cannot see through it. So, you know, I know there are some family connections there, you know, and so have a look at the hedge, and maybe that's a suggestion. Because if we want a really good screen, that would be a super screen all year through.
Okay, I think that might be a note to the applicant. But, you know, we're going to have to leave this delegated to do for our professional planners to do something sensible, which I'm more than happy to leave them.
They don't like evergreens, so.
Well, okay.
Well,
They don't like.
and it's in consultation with the chair. So.
Okay, right. Right, we have Councillor Stevens. Do you know, I thought this would be quite a quick one. Councillor Stevens, not that I'm blaming you. Every right to say you.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to keep quiet until Councillor White just said that. I know what you mean about laurels, but I've got to say it's not just about us looking at it, it's about the creatures. And if we're going to build all over a piece of land, at least let's give back something to the ecology. Putting in native species does that. If we're going to specify something, my view is that's what we should specify. Thank you.
Okay, well, can we have it when we do have it in consultation with the chairman and the ward members? Is that a possibility? Or at any rate, the chairman and I'll consult. I'll consult with the ward members. Okay, consultation with the chair. Right, we do in fact have a proposal, and I can't remember which way round you were. You propose the officer's recommendation. Councillor Fleming.
Can I just confirm that the informative condition is going on as well?
Yes.
Yep.
That was my next question.
Okay.
Do you accept that informative as part and parcel of
Yeah,
the recommendation. Is that all right with you, officers?
Yeah, we don't.
Okay, can we get a quick show of hands on that one, please? Thank you very much. Anyone against? Abstention, Councillor Siddle? Abstention. So, did you get that, Miss Bird? Abstention from Councillor Siddle. The rest of us were affirmative. Right,
Yes,
thank
Chairman, can I just clarify about the additional petition was mentioned? Was that proposed and seconded?
Yes. I'm happy
Well,
to say that the informative, it's purely informative, it's not enforceable, but it would be neighbourly if the applicants would take note of it.
Yeah, we did. Yes, the proposer did accommodate that into their proposal. Is that acceptable, Miss Bird? If it isn't,
No, that's great, yeah.
And just to confirm, it is an adaptation of conditions.
Yes.
okay. Right, we're done on that one. That is approved with some slight amendments to the conditions and the informative. Thank you. Right, item 6 is our second planning application, Walden Cottage, 58 Walden House Road. Again, we have actually just the one speaker this time. Following the presentation, please.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So this is an application for a replacement dwelling with a detached garage, landscaping, and also an extension to the garden land at Walden Cottage, 58 Walden House Road in Great Totham. So this is a plan showing the location of the application site. Another one of the same, basically. So you've got Walden House Road along here. You've got the existing dwelling in the southeastern corner, which is a bungalow. But the application site shows the extent of the curtilage of the dwelling that is proposed. The existing property is about 7.2 metres from the road. Existing dwelling, bungalow, 2 bedrooms. And then this plan shows the additional garden land that is proposed or requested as part of this replacement dwelling application. This is a site layout of the proposed dwelling, so 2-storey dwelling, roughly centrally located, detached garage in the corner here, vehicle access, approximately middle of the site along Walden House Road, in the same position as what's there. Elevations, floor plans, 4 bedrooms, and the roof plan. And this is the proposed garage, double garage. We've got some sort of street view, the existing property, one direction than the other. And then we've got some photos. These are the same photos as from the previous application. I think I understand the development has progressed beyond what is visible here. Some pictures of the surrounding area. And just for information, this is the previous application which was refused, which shows a larger additional site area or extension, garden extension. And it was also for a larger house. That's the floor plans of the refusal one, and this is the permission that was granted for a 2-storey replacement dwelling back in 2018. So compared to the previously refused application, the current proposal has gone back more like it was originally approved in 2018, certainly in terms of the size and design of the dwelling itself. But the garden, the extension to the garden proposed is still a concern of officers, and it's concerns that the development would harm the character appearance of the area, and it would be an unnecessary urbanisation of the countryside. It is less than what was previously refused, but would still result in demonstrable visual harm, and is recommended for refusal on this basis. Thank you.
Thank you. So our speaker, please, that's Mr. McKinnon, who's the agent. Please come forward, Mr. McKinnon. Pick a chair, any chair. I expect you know the rules, but I'll say it again anyway. We'll start timing our 2 minutes in a minute. And we will time from when you begin to speak, and you've got 2 minutes precisely.
The application before you is generally accepted in design and location. The issue at hand is that of an area to the rear of the application site. The original house currently located on the application site was within an area of land greater than within this application. This land has had uses as amenity space for a period of over 70 years. Agenda item 321 states the land in question is agricultural. The land has never been used for agriculture. The land is bare, has no ecological value, and does not positively contribute to the wider rural area. It is important to note that the existing house has previously had usage of the land in question within this application as amenity space. For reasons unknown to us, the extant planning permission did not include the full curtilage of the existing dwelling. However, our client recently acquired part of this land within the original larger curtilage, and we seek to put this back into its former usage. The area in contention equates to a 16% increase in the extant planning area. However, this is still 13.25% less than the original area, which was previously enjoyed as amenity space. The additional area incorporated within this application does not equate to 100% of the original curtilage as per the agenda item. The additional land in question lies directly behind the application property and, if granted permission, would not be visible from Walden House Road. The mature existing laurel hedge and fencing to the Walden House Road frontage provide natural screening. The only aperture that will allow a view into the site from the proposed site entrance, being a width of 3 metres, is blocked by the proposal dwelling. Due to the topography, none of the contentious land is visible from any other aspect.
Thank you very much. Perfect timing again. Right, members of discussion, if there's anything you want to ask or discuss. Right, Councillor Keys, you're first.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I've called this application in, as you're aware. I've got a couple of things here. Could you explain how the harm is so significant it warrants refusal, please?
Through you, Chairman, the garden extensions generally are harmful. It's changing the character of the land from into domestic use, with all the associated potential domestic paraphernalia and manicured planting and lawn and potential means of enclosure, and potentially buildings as well. So it's a change in the character from non-residential land to residential usage. I think the applicant referred to it never being agricultural land, but that is the only lawful permitted use of that land if it's not included within the curtilage. If there's a claim that it is curtilage lawfully, then there are mechanisms to go through in terms of making applications for certificate of lawfulness to establish whether that is actually the case or not. And obviously, if it is legally curtilage, then there wouldn't be an issue with it remaining curtilage. But the application as submitted has been assessed is for an extension to the curtilage. There are applications. There have been applications where extensions to curtilage are potentially more harmful. They're more obvious, but there would be and to talk about protecting the countryside for its own benefit, and because you can't necessarily see it from the road doesn't mean it's not harmful in terms of the damage it would cause to the general character and appearance of the area.
I'll come back and probably a lot of you will be surprised, but I did go to school next door to this property all by one, and when I was at school there was just grazing on there. Now grazing is naturally grass, which this will be turned back into grass. Now I drove down there purposely this morning on the way home, this afternoon on the way home from work, and I think Councillor Sidler backed me up on this. As you drive down the hill towards Great Tottenham School, if you look on the left-hand side, there's all horse paraphernalia, brightly gaudily coloured jumps, and there's a menage, I believe, there. Well, I think that is a lot more exclusive than a bit of land that are good sized ride-on mower 3 or 4 times up and down it to turn it back into grass, which when I went to school a couple of years ago was only when the sheep were on there. You know, it can't be seen from the road. It's going to be covered. Well, the house in front of it is going to be there. And I just find this, we're going against it for turning rough land or grassland back into grassland. I know it's changing from agricultural to domestic, but next door field, there's a load of gaudily coloured riding equipment, stables, fencing that's, no offence to horsey people, but I wouldn't want it in my garden, but like that. But I think this is very strange. We're knocking this little bit of garden for thing, but I will let some of the others. I've got some other bit if I could come back a bit later. Thank you.
I'm sure you will. I've got Councillor Siddle next, but I will just make the observation that equestrian use isn't agricultural either. Right, Councillor Siddle.
Thank you, Chair. I can see that this is an improvement on the previous application that came forward and is a much better design house. However, I really still don't see the need for this double gable. The double gable, which seems to be proliferating in Great Totham and Wickham Bishops, is an imposing design and is not in the character of Walden House Road. So the property that has been passed is in the character of Walden House Road. So I really don't understand the need to change it and to change it into this double gable thing, which seems to be proliferating across the north part of the district and is not a village style house. The thing about I can see Councillor Keys's point, but the thing about the land is we don't know it will stay as grass. In a couple of years' time, there could be a huge summer house or something on that, which immediately is encroaching into the countryside. That change of use isn't a change of use about saying, oh, someone's going to turn it into a garden. It's change of use in saying someone could put a structure there, someone could build something there, and immediately that then changes the design and the countryside, and there's an intrusion into the countryside. As you come down Walden House Road, which is what Councillor Keys was describing, you have a view over fields. And the thing about at the moment, it's a tiny little bungalow they can't really see. So we're going to have immediately a change in that view by having this house here. The other concern for me, and the other concern in terms of horsepower and failure and jumps, is they're temporary. They're not there all the time, and they can be moved, and they will be moved around as people use that equipment. The other concern I have in terms of this particular application is the garage. On the original application, there is no garage. The location of the garage right next to the road is again an immediate intrusion into the street scene. So if they want to build a garage, I can understand that, but not in that location, right by the pavement, right by the street scene. You will see a roof. So it's not, again, something which is original to the application, and I don't understand why they're wanting to do that. So I can see on balance it's a better application. However, there are lots of concerns which again weren't there in the original application, and I really don't understand why this is coming back.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, first of all, I'd say with the horsepower and being brightly coloured, mostly it stays where you put it. It is possible to move it, but most of us don't have time to move it. And it can look pretty messy. I fully accept that. But actually, when you look at the site, I think the 2021 00218 was refused on a delegated powers, and this is something we're having a look at. I think they've listened to the previous objections and they've reduced the size of the garden, which is good. And for me, looking at the layout, I don't think you'd be able to get another house there. I think it would be too cramped. And I actually personally, I like the design of the house. I don't think it will be intrusive. There's already a house there. So for me, I think it does look like a countryside design. I think it does fit in with the landscape. It might be a little bit taller, but the design looks countryside. For me, it's what you'd expect to see in the countryside. So I actually don't have a problem with it. But I think that we go back to the hedges must be well conditioned. that there is adequate screening, but I think for me, they have removed the concerns about the garden area being far too large. So I think this is a much better application, and the house is much better because the last one was massive, and I think this is a much more acceptable. So, well done on the applicants for trying to address them, even though they might not please everybody. I think they've at least made an attempt to improve the impact. So that's just my views on it, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in view of Councillor Siddle's objectives with regards to the gables, can I just confirm that actually what we're discussing here is the change of use of that bit of land to the north of the site from residential or from agricultural to residential?
Through you, Chairman, the application is for a replacement dwelling and garage landscaping as part of that, as well as an extension to the garden. But officers have no objection to any of it except for the garden extension. So that's why that reason for refusal only relates to the garden extension.
So your only reason for refusal at the moment is purely the change of use, is what you're saying?
Yes, yeah. So previously there were other concerns in terms of the size of the house and design and the garden extension, but now the other concerns have been addressed to the revised scheme, and the remaining concern is the garden extension, and that's what officers feel would be harmful. And but the application is for everything, including the garden extension.
And could you indulge me, because I think this is going to come up on the next application as well, what exactly precisely is the definition of urbanisation?
Well, as officers, we would suggest that it's introducing uses and development that you would more typically find in a urban area rather than a rural area. And so in this case, we've got a piece of agricultural rural land that they're asking to be able to use as residential garden land, and some of the concerns about what happens when a piece of land becomes part of your garden in terms of how you use it, how physical changes you might do to that piece of land as part of your garden, and that introduces an element of urbanisation because it's development that isn't typically rural and not agricultural, it's not field or so that's what we talk about as urbanisation.
Sorry, can I just come back? So a house with with a large garden like that would be something you think might be more found in an urban area rather than rural? Is basically what you're saying.
It's not through Chairman, having houses with big gardens is more typical in the rural area than in the urban area, but it's the change of use of this piece of farmland, agricultural land, which has a particular character and appearance which is rural, to a piece of garden land, domestic garden land, which and its appearance will automatically or inevitably change. And people have talked about, members have talked about domestic outbuildings. I've talked about more manicured grass, means of enclosure, and things that are more character and appearance are different to how it is at the moment, and that is what an element of or an example of urbanisation. There are other examples that we talk about in different applications, but in terms of this one, that's what we're meaning when we talk about urbanisation.
Well, thank you for that. I'm not entirely sure I'm much clearer, but thanks.
Just to add a point to that, there is a general principle also in terms of these changes of uses that we do have to consider in our decision making generally. If precedents are set, which in terms of the local plan, on our policies for protecting the countryside and its intrinsic values, and from officers' point of view, if we support this scheme on the basis that, for example, it can't be seen, it's smaller than it was before, so it's probably not as bad, that in itself is setting an undesirable principle in terms of how we approach any other similar developments. And we have had many of instances where principles are in a way almost overturned to our detriment of defending that position in some other applications. Obviously the decision must, or the recommendation must stand on its own, and in our view it does. Hence what's in front of members now. But also we consider other applications that may come forward where people can draw examples. So we need to be very mindful about how we just make decisions like this. I think as Mrs. Matthews mentioned, if the applicants feel that there's some historical legacy or legality about that land, then there's a mechanism that they can go through to actually demonstrate that. But that's not what we have in front of us. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and to continue along that theme, I agree with everything that you've just said. Well, obviously you're the planning officer, but I would echo what you've just said. It's been suggested that it doesn't matter changing the use because it's not currently being used for agricultural purposes, even though it's defined as agricultural use land. And I think that's a very dangerous precedent because if that opens the floodgates to people saying, well, I'll change the use first, and then once I've done that, I'll put in my application, and people will have to say yes because I've already done it. And I don't think we want to go down that route. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Morley. I was going to have a...
No, sorry.
But no, Councillor Morley.
I've driven past. I did struggle to look in, but what actually is the land being used for at the moment? Is it sheep or cattle on there? I couldn't really see.
I'm not clear if it's scrub or what, but it certainly isn't part of the adjacent agricultural, obviously
You
agricultural land.
Sorry, Chair. You couldn't put a condition on that they can't build structures on it. That doesn't work, does it? Is that possible?
That would be
To protect
messing with
the
permitted
land?
development, and I'm really not
No, so just a
sure.
question. So,
I think we probably should.
I agree it gets complicated,
It
but
gets a bit awkward because we're talking about a piece of land which they'll incorporate into a larger residential envelope. It would be very awkward. I mean, I've thought about that, but then there's other issues, fencing and things of that nature, and types of fencing, and how are these demarcated, and again the impact of that. So there's a number of things. Do we then condition fencing around it?
no.
It starts to bring up all these other questions.
And applicants can, of course, appeal against conditions, so you might find you're on a hiding to nothing anyway. I mean,
But it is sort of, when you look at it, it is infill in that sort of area, and there's houses all behind it, and there's a tarmac drive to another big house, and it's very
I
difficult.
hear what you're
You
saying.
know what I mean, but
Councillor White?
Just out of curiosity, is the red line around all of the land that the applicant owns, is that what's in their ownership? Or is that just what was in the previous application? Because I'm looking at it thinking that wouldn't be big enough to farm anyway. I don't know how you'd farm cattle or sheep or anything. It looks tiny. I don't know how many acres it is, but it doesn't look... Yeah, one sheep or half a cow.
I suppose you could let it to the farmer, but presumably if it was different, there'd be a blue line as well?
To Chairman, this is the copy of the location plan that came in with the application. It doesn't include any blue land, so this suggests that the applicant does only own this piece of land. But in response to the question about it's not very big and you'd only perhaps get one sheep on it, obviously historically it did form part of a bigger field. I think Councillor Keys referred to sheep being grazed on there historically, maybe not recently, but also so it may well have been bought and separated in terms of ownership from the agricultural land of the wider area behind the property, but that doesn't mean that no, it doesn't put pressure really on the council to grant plan permission for its use, to change its use from what its lawful use is as agricultural land, and land can be classed as being agricultural, even if it's not actively being used for agriculture, because I think, as I said, perhaps at the beginning, the only lawful use of that piece of land would be for agricultural use. So sometimes we do talk about agricultural land being agricultural, even though it's not necessarily being farmed commercially. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Councillor Siddle.
Yeah, I'd like to put forward that we recommend the officer's recommendation to refuse the application.
Is that seconded? Okay, Councillor Fleming, do you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Chair. Before we get to that point, I just wanted to ask Miss Matthews, just to be clear, so if the applicant did put in for a certificate of lawfulness and that was found to be successful, your objections to this development then fall away, is that correct?
That would be correct, because there wouldn't need to be a change of use proposed as part of the application. So the application would be just for a replacement dwelling within the existing curtilage of the house.
Councillor Morgan.
Just on that point, I think I would be right. You will correct me if I'm not. That if they were able to prove 10 years lawful use under that way, that you actually the planning office doesn't have any discretion at all, but has to issue a certificate of lawful use.
Yes, through Chairman, the certificate of lawfulness applications are determined on matters of fact, with no planning judgment or merit involved. So if they are able to demonstrate it, then yes, the council would have a duty to issue a certificate, but the onus would be on the applicant to provide the evidence that it had been like that. And you do get some cases where use has been going on, but they're not able to demonstrate it, so they're still not able to get the certificate. But yeah, it would be no matters of fact and no merit.
Thank you.
Interesting. That would leave them with the fallback position of the extant permission, which, as it happens from a design point of view, I prefer too, like Councillor Siddle. But as we said,
I mean, there was talk of it being used like that for 17 years as amenity land. Is that?
yeah,
Is that?
that might be provable. But the point is, we can only make a judgment on what's before us and not what we'd like to have before us. And I'm not sure that a house that is significantly larger than the bungalow wouldn't benefit from the extra amenity land, and that might outweigh the harm of it being left as it is. Nevertheless, we're debating Councillor Siddle's proposal for the officer recommendation. It is duly seconded. Does anyone else want to speak for or against that recommendation, or have we covered that in the discussion? Councillor White.
I mean, I'd make an alternative proposal if the first one fails.
If this one fails, then obviously that's open to anyone. So let's see what we've got if we're ready to vote. So those in favour of Councillor Siddle's proposal to accept the officer recommendation as is, duly seconded by Councillor Stevens. Those in favour, please show. Those against? Abstentions? Right, did you get that, Miss Bird, or would you like me to count? I think that was four against. 1, 2, 3, 4 against. Oh, sorry, I was abstaining. Councillor Fleming is abstaining. The proposer and seconder supported, and we're beeping. Somebody's beeping. Oh, is it a car? Okay. I don't know what mine sounds like, but I don't think it's near enough to hear. Colour?
Not mine. Right.
Oh, it stopped. That's good.
There
you go.
Is it a car or a mini people carrier?
Okay, one cross look from Councillor Siddle and it falls silent. That's what we need. Right, so that being the case, can I have an alternative?
I'd like to make a proposal that we disagree with the officer's recommendation, and I'd like to put forward a recommendation of approval.
Before you second it, I'm afraid Councillor White has to give our
The reasons I give is there's already a residential dwelling there. The applicants state they've been using the garden as residential for an excess of 17 years, and I've just Googled it on the map and it looks like garden to me. And I think this is a material condition to approving it. I also think personally it fits in with the street scene. I think there's no harm to the amenities, and I think it will actually be a welcome addition, and it's more attractive than the existing building.
Can I add to it or not?
It's all supposed to go. I know we have this discussion about the word supposed the other day, Councillor Keys, but it is a point of law that it all has to come from one person at the same time. But if Councillor happens to glance across,
I'd like to also say then the benefits outweigh the harm, and I think it is a design that's suitable for the area. I think it fits in with the street scene. I think it's suitable for rural development, and I think the garden is already in use for residential purposes. And I think the applicant has worked with the authorities on the previous objections, and I think they've overcome the previous objections by making the garden area smaller.
is that seconded? I'm assuming you're not seconding. No. Okay, so we have a whole new debate, and Councillor Siddle has his hand up first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In that reasons for recommendation, I've not heard one policy quoted in terms of our LDP and in terms of anything at all. So I have grave concerns about this, and I also have grave concerns, as the officer pointed out, in terms of this setting a precedent for other rural land. We are, by doing this, setting a really, really bad situation where other applicants now can use this against the council and put forward turning agricultural land into domestic, and that's not acceptable on my view.
Fair point. Anybody else?
I'll go with policy S1. And I'm trying to work out what the other ones. I can't remember offhand what the other ones are. What's the one that's the suitable reuse of land? H4.
H4. That is the one in the reason. Yeah. The original reason for refusal.
It's S1 and H4.
I would just say we need to be very mindful about just using policies, because I don't think it's applicable in cases like that. We are looking at land in which our policies tend to protect, rather than lands which may be redundant or abandoned, or may not serve a purpose, or may result in a detrimental impact upon something, the environment, people's livelihoods or whatever. We're not dealing with that in this particular case here. We're dealing with land that we would normally protect, the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. So that's, in my view, sort of completely against that, and we could fall foul of that in any other applications in front of us.
Can I suggest you don't add anything to the proposal?
I think I'll stick with my original proposal, which is just every application is determined on its own benefits, and in my opinion, as the proposer, this site already has residential use, and the benefits and existing use outweigh any harm, which differentiates it between other planning applications that may come up before the North West Committee or are determined under delegated powers.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify then? There isn't anything in law, I just want to hear that I'm right here. There isn't anything in law that says if you use agricultural land for a different purpose for X number of years, that then it isn't agricultural land anymore. There isn't that sort of precedent in law, is there?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Well, it's only lawful if you can prove it and you can demonstrate it. There's a fairly high hurdle in terms of how you do that. But sometimes people do things and they do things under stealth. Is that almost a sanction that's been made by particular decisions? No one doesn't know.
Don't give it a dirty look.
Because you mentioned the Honda, I have a silver Honda.
It's like a silvery grey one.
Yeah, it's a saloon.
No, this is like a 4x4.
Oh, right, okay. Right.
I know it's a Honda or a Toyota.
Oh, right.
One of those. Right, moving on. Well, it's gone quiet again, so.
Yeah.
Councillor Stevens, sorry, please do continue. We didn't
So
mean to.
to be really, really clear, how long does something have to be in a different use?
10 years.
10 years. And do we have
Well-
proof that this has been used
We
for
don't
more
know
than
that.
10
It's not
years?
been demonstrated through the
Right. So we have
the legal processes.
right. So we have no proof in front of us, only sort of what people remember. And if we go down this route and say, oh, just because we think we can remember, but without proof, we're going to allow agricultural land to be converted, as Councillor Siddle says, we're setting a huge and I think really dangerous precedent, and I don't think we should go down that route. Thank
Can I
you.
just add as well, because, you know, obviously we deal with certificate of lawfulness developments all the time. And I, with all respect to the council, I know you had a look on Google. We get Google images all the time. You know, Google images are snapshot in time. Yeah, it doesn't show any continuity. It doesn't show how things change. It would be remiss of us as a local authority if we just approve certificates of lawfulness because somebody submitted a Google image in a particular point of time. You know, this is it's quite a significant area in terms of law. This is an area people try to circumvent all the time. So we deal with these matters all particular time, and just taking and again, with no disrespect, making a decision based on looking at a Google image, because really it's just the garden area we're dealing with. We don't have a problem with the rest of it. To me, it's very, 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 very dangerous. Would put the council in a very difficult position. It would even mean us as an authority, if we're making decisions, even on a delegated purpose, we have to have regard to these decisions that the council make at committee.
Councillor Keith.
I'll come back on that. Mr. Johnson, I think many of us here sit on parish councils, and we often get them where the houses have come up for sale and they've been an alteration, and the council themselves send Google images of a dormer or a stash window or bits and pieces comes through, and that is what this was taken XYZ. And that's as a parish council will say, well, that's how they've proved that this has been done. I can't remember how long it's been there. And they have used satellite images and Google Maps for this.
Yeah, I mean, it does depend on what it is.
Yeah.
Because if we're talking about a dormer window, that's a built structure.
But you yourself have seen
We're talking about a piece of land, which, you know, it's...
I think we're going slightly off piece here. We're really not debating the proposal. What I would say is we're not looking at a certificate of a lawful development, simply because that wouldn't be here anyway, and it wouldn't form part of the planning permission. You know, if the applicants want to put in a certificate of lawful development, then they're absolutely free to do that, but there's no reason why they would produce any proof here, because that's not what they're asking for here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So anyone have anything else to say on the proposal on the table? Councillor Morgan.
Well, just to say that obviously I'm being a solicitor myself, I have a great sort of respect for the word of the law, but this bit of land we're talking about is agricultural in name only. It's never going to see a plough. It's never going to see cattle on it or anything else. So I think pragmatism does have a place to play. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, I must admit, I firmly support the principle, but not necessarily in every single case, because I can remember granting, I think it was about 2 acres in Wickham Bishops. I didn't, in point of fact, support that, but I remember that happened at this committee. Councillor Stevens, did I see a tentative hand there?
Yes, it was a bit tentative. I think I know the answer to this. So if we were to approve this and then the next application comes along and they want to add a sliver of land that's currently agricultural, are we then bound to approve it, please? Thank you.
I wouldn't say bound, but it certainly would help the application, would it not, Mr. Johnson?
I mean, we would have regard to this.
We'd have-
That's what I could say. We wouldn't then sort of carte blanche, but we have to have regard for that, yeah? We do have to think that if we then refused it and sort of went against a decision of the council, because even though it's opposite, it's a decision of the council, it does raise big questions about how are we making decisions, how are we utilizing the plans. It's authorities are increasingly coming under scrutiny by, especially on appeal, about their understanding and the interpretation of their own plans and how they use it and how they demonstrate or otherwise decisions that they make. We more than know that, but that's equally the case with other authorities as well. So that's why, as officers, we have to, exercise our position in terms of the local plan and any evidence being one that's through legal processes is clearly demonstrable, and that's not the case here. But as you said, I mean, that wasn't what the application was about. It was just responding to the previous reason for refusal against a larger land into a slightly smaller land, but the principle is the same. Exactly the same.
Councillor Morley.
Yeah, sorry. So this slithers of land have been sold off for years. I'm thinking about Brook Road. Strathern sold it, so they made all their gardens. Are you saying that's not really lawful now? Farmers can't do that, or because I mean that must have been about 3 acres. I reckon he must have sold.
Sorry, I'm familiar because it's the same
Well,
village.
it was before I was a count. Yes.
We're talking about Tolstonites.
Yeah, but
the
lots of-
farmers can presumably sell anything they like to whomever they like, but that doesn't mean the purchasers can use it for whatever they like. If you see. So in this case, Mr. Strafford, I have no idea if they applied for certificates of lawful use or what they did, or I have no idea, but in no way limits the farmers from selling the land.
I agree.
There
But
is,
it does go
there
on
is something
all
of a
the
limit
time.
to what it can be used for after that's
Right, it was
happened.
just that.
But again, we're well and truly off.
I know we are, but well, it kind of affects this bit. But
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. And I think you've just said it there, that people have taken a piece of agricultural land and they've purchased it, and there's nothing against that. But then they've put sheds on it, and they've put, whatever did you say, lawnmowers or lawnmower houses or something on it. And that's exactly what will happen. If we take land out of agricultural designation, it will end up getting covered in garden paraphernalia. Thank you.
That is, right, this is going to be the last go because we've gone round and round this proposal so much.
Thank you,
We're
Chair.
in danger of forgetting what it
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, my proposal still stands. If we're talking about putting sheds and having an issue with garden sheds, I think you're only allowed something like, I don't know, is it 4 square metres under permitted development for a garden shed? Whereas if it stays as agricultural, it's an awful, or it's a really, really big building. You can put a really, really big building up under permitted development if it's agricultural. So, personally, every application onto its own. I personally don't have a problem with this. It's up to the other members if they support me or not, but I don't have a problem with it. So,
Sorry, Miss Matthews, sorry.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to correct possibly permitted development rights for gardens, outbuildings. You can cover 50% of your garden in buildings. Yeah. You can go up to 4 metres high, as long as you're far enough from the boundary. So I'm not sure where 4 square metres comes from.
How far from the boundary?
Sorry,
How far from the
2 metres. As long as you're 2 metres far from the boundary, you can go up to 4 metres high with a ridge roof, and you can cover. Under permitted development, you can cover 50% of your curtilage in buildings.
Okay.
Not in front of the house, but no, in the rear garden. And the other point I was going to make, if I had the opportunity, but was the and I think reference has been made to a number of people who bought farmland, and even this piece of land that they're looking to change of use, the owners would still be able to benefit from that piece of land. They could still own it. They could still benefit from being able to look over it. It could still be part of their property, but there's in planning there's quite a distinct difference between owning a piece of land, I don't know, having it rough grassland, and actually it being within your curtilage, because once it's within your curtilage and residential use curtilage, then you start getting these permitted development rights, and you've got a lot more rights to do things and change it and then close it that you wouldn't have if it wasn't residential curtilage. So that is the distinction between perhaps some of the other cases been referred to and this, where they've actually applied for it to be residential curtilage, and once it's residential curtilage then you get a lot of rights, but it doesn't mean that you can't own land, and you can't own land And some people do have a house and garden and they own the whole field next door and they benefit from it because they can see it and they've got a nice outlook from their property, but it doesn't mean that it's part of their garden, residential garden, and it doesn't mean they can change it. But it's still rural in character and appearance. So we're not saying that the owners or the applicants can't benefit from this piece of land. Other officers were suggesting that it would be harmful if it was allowed to be residential curtilage. So I make that distinction.
Yeah, well, yes, because sometimes people have 1,000 acres around their garden. One question on this hypothetical piece of land next to a garden, would it be agricultural to keep chickens on it or grow vegetables? Is that a grey green area?
There are grey areas. How much use does it mean? Residential type related use, is it before it starts the material change of use? And it'd have to be on a case by case basis exactly what had been done and how it was being used. But having a few chickens running around on there with no buildings, that's not residential curtilage, but
right. And just thank you. And just as an observation, there's nothing actually stopping the resident with the existing size of garden covering 50% of it with 4-metre high buildings.
That would be correct.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I just bring it all out. Right. I think we really do need a vote. So we have the proposal to overturn the officer recommendation. We have an approval. We have some reasons. Can we delegate conditions to officers should this pass? And can we have those in favour, please? Those against? Abstentions. That includes me, Miss Birding, if you can't see me. Myself and Mrs. Fleming. So that is in fact approved.
On the issue of conditions, reference was, or a question was made about removing permitted development rights from this piece of land.
I think we decided we couldn't.
Just decided against that. Okay, just wanted to be sure because that is sometimes put on.
We did. Okay, thank you, members. Yes, that is approved, subject to the conditions, which will be the standard ones, probably only the standard ones, but that will be in consultation with myself.
I've just quickly looking through the consultation responses. There are I don't know what they are. Environmental health and recommended conditions, the highways and recommended conditions.
Okay.
Normally have a standard condition about demolishing the existing house.
I'm assuming all the standard conditions plus anything else you feel is appropriate and in consultation with myself. Okay, thank you very much. Right, moving on, we have item 7, which is Jack's Barn, Crouchman's Farm Road, Alting. If we could have the presentation, please. Oh, you off now, Mrs. Matthews?
If that's okay.
Of course.
Yes.
Wish I could join you. No, not really. Very happy here, thank you. No, that's not what I wanted. Thank you.
Take care.
And there is a member update on this, and we do have the applicant to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just draw members' attention, as you said, to the members' update. Also, we have a verbal update. Langford and Alting Parish Council have submitted their comments in support of the application, and the Environmental Health and County Highways have also, just to note, haven't raised any objections. This is the application site here. This also forms part of the application site here, which would be to the south, I believe, of the site. The east of the site. So this is the proposed extension, which is this is the block plan that shows the proposed extension. So this is the existing house here. Again, this is the block plan that shows the extension in relation to the existing barn. It has been proposed that this building, agricultural building existing, is removed to offset the impact by the extension. So these are your existing floor plans. So currently the existing house has 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom and a combined kitchen and lounge. The elevations of the existing, the floor plans of the proposed, which will create an additional 2 bedrooms and an ensuite to one of the bedrooms. These are the proposed elevations. So, and this is the street view from looking south down Crouchman's Farm. This is the existing building here, and this large building here you can see is what was proposed to be removed. And again here, this is the existing view north down Crouchman's Farm Road. This is the existing property, and again the large building behind the existing building property to be removed. And again, this is the closer. So this large building here is what was proposed, this agricultural building, to be removed, and this is the existing dwelling. This application is a resubmission of previously refused application, which within the reasons for refusal of the previous application, it was considered that the proposed extension as a result of its siting, design, scale and bulk would result in an overly large, dominant, incongruous addition to the dwelling that erodes the existing openness of the site. As there have been no changes to the previously refused application, this application is concerns haven't been addressed, and therefore this application is refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we have our speaker, please, if you'd like to come forward. Take a seat. You'll know by now exactly what I'm going to say next, which is 2 minutes. Yes, please use your microphone. We have the timer up. Make yourself comfortable and begin when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with policy H4, effective use of land, 5.26. The council recognises extensions to existing buildings can help secure additional and more functional housing units to meet present housing needs. Currently, our property doesn't function for our family. Our daughter does not have her own room. She sleeps with us in our only bedroom. She doesn't have space to play, room for toys. We have no bath. We have no dining room, making it very hard for me to work from home comfortably. I also care for my elderly grandmother who lives next door to us. Sadly, the extension is as life-changing in the fact that we would have to move and I could no longer care for her. The land where the extension will be placed is concrete. The site has not been used for agriculture since it was closed 20 plus years ago by my family. The barn for removal is redundant and has not been used for the same period of time, and the surrounding land is unsuitable for agriculture and has always been wasteland of brambles and weeds. There would be no loss to agriculture. Removing the 56 square metre hay barn will visually improve the whole site. Its metal cladding can be seen as you approach from the road due to its height and span and is an eyesore. Materials will be reclaimed where possible, as we did with the original dwelling, reclaimed roof tiles, weatherboard, aluminium windows to be used over UPVC. Designed so it was south-facing, maximising the use of light and warmth as the front is full glass panels, and we have found with our current dwelling the house heats quickly and minimal heating is required. The boundary is existing natural hedging of hawthorn and laurel, and we have added extra to thicken and screen off from the road. Once mature, the site will not be seen at all by the public, and the surrounding land is grasses and wildflower to sustain wildlife. My husband is a farmer. He farms the field opposite and works 1.5 miles up the road, meaning if we can remain in the village, it would be far more sustainable than to move further away from his workplace where more travel would be involved. And we would like to remain in the village where I was born to raise my family.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, members, who'd like to go first? Councillor Morgan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, I've called this in. Could I just ask the officer to indulge me and provide again a photograph of the actual structure where this... I think you go on a bit further.
Want to be removed?
No, no, I would like to show you, if you could just put that photograph up. So, looking at the one at the bottom there, I just want to make sure that we're all clear here that that small, simple, black weatherboard clad structure is the one that we're discussing. Its extension is one we're discussing here. Yes.
Sorry, Chair, yes, that's correct.
Now, I live in Great Braxted, and I'm pretty certain that the cricket pavilion is bigger than that structure there. And yet, noting in your proposed reasons for refusal, the proposed extension, as a result of its siting, design, scale, and bulk, would result in an overly large and incongruous addition to the dwelling that erodes the existing openness of the site, which in conjunction with the change of use of agricultural land to residential garden space would result in a harmful, and here we go, suburbanization of the countryside. Now, I'm delighted that officers are keen to make sure that Walden and the Walden district stays a green and pleasant land. And as the representative for Wickham Bishops and Woodham, I'm particularly keen that this rural aspect should stay. But I would urge you to think that we're not running a theme park here. We're putting together communities where people are able to work and earn a living, and it's going to be increasingly difficult to do that. And I just wonder whether, in the way that you have described this, the language could be regarded as pejorative in the extreme. I've just put that out there to you. What I would suggest is you've cited a number of policies, S1, etc. And I would just suggest or invite you to agree that if one, because it's essentially a subjective judgment that you have used here, that if one was to have a different view as to exactly how this would work, then in fact that development that is proposed would be perfectly acceptable under those planning policies that you have used to refuse it. Would you perhaps agree with that, or not?
Ms. Walden.
Obviously, each application is taken on its own merits. So whilst in this position we have come to the conclusion that it isn't acceptable, it would depend on the area and the location and the surroundings and the use of the land of where the development is to be placed. And that's when the assessment would be made on the impact, etc. In this particular case, it's designated agricultural, so a further residential development is considered to urbanise the countryside. The large building that's to be removed is currently used in agriculture, which it ties in with the use of the land. And however, a residential extension would not be agricultural, and therefore it would be urbanising the land in this case. Thank you.
The other policy, there's a policy H7 for agricultural and essential workers. Was that ever a consideration when you were thinking about this application?
The actual existing property was developed under Class Q, which is a prior notification application. It isn't assessed entirely against the policies, and therefore, sorry, I forgot where I was going with this. Therefore, the use of the building was originally agriculture, which ties in with the use of the land.
Right. But it's now being used by a hard-working family. One being a farmer who works locally, and if he can't do that, then he's not. He needs to be nearby for calming and lambing purposes, and obviously somebody else who I think works for the police and works from home. So what I'm saying to you is that that would seem to fall into that particular planning policy, and I'm surprised that doesn't seem to have been a consideration at all in your coming to or arriving at your decision.
Well, the assessment is based against the design impact and bulk of the extension. The occupiers were not a consideration of the impact of design. in that respect. If it was felt that an agricultural tie to the dwelling would overcome any concerns raised, then that could have been done. However,
Can I just say, I think we might be conflating matters because we have to look at the nature of what's been applied for. And I think, to sort of bring in additional issues, whether this is not the nature of this application, I think is if I may just respectfully say, it's probably improper.
Yes, we're not looking at an agricultural tie, that's the point. Okay, thank you. I actually had Councillor White next. I hear what you're saying.
Thank you.
For a specific purpose of building with a tie,
Yeah.
Right, I've got Councillor White, Councillor Fleming, Councillor Keith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm a bit, the previous application, I can understand the concerns, although I came to a different view to the officers. This one, I don't understand at all. So what we're saying is we've already got planning permission for a residential unit under Class Q with no agricultural tie, no issues whatsoever. Under planning policy, it was allowed.
Can I just say, just for correction, it's not planning permission. It's not the planning policy.
Yeah.
It's under
Class Q.
government legislation.
Yeah.
Through the Development.
Yeah. Class Q. Yeah.
So the policies that we apply are not relevant to this.
Yeah. Okay. But all right, I'll change my wording then. We already have an existing residential dwelling on this land. It's a very unobtrusive, single-storey, black wood, red tile, typical British countryside design. And behind it is a pretty ugly, old-fashioned, looks like asbestos or concrete roof building, which looks very old. And also adjacent to the road, there's a falling down building that I'm surprised is still standing. Being farmers, I know what these buildings are like. And we want to replace the big ugly barn with a small single, that's actually smaller extension, that's smaller than the agricultural barn. For a family, it's only 1 bedroom. I think I just don't understand this decision. And for me, I think we absolutely should approve this. I think it's right for the family. I think it's right for the countryside. And under policy S1, I think it's actually going to give a better effect on the countryside than what is currently there. And I'd like to put forward a proposal that we approve this application because I think it ties in with all of our policies. It's allowing a family to stay in the area, and you can't get much smaller or unobtrusive than either the building that's there or the extension. If it was a two-storey extension, maybe I can understand it, but it's smaller than the existing barn it's going to replace. So I don't quite understand the reasoning, but then I'm from the country and I don't see a problem with it. So if I get I'd like to put it forward.
Can I just?
Yes, Mr.
It's I mean, to actually draw the comparison between a building which is designed and is intrinsic to the countryside, even if it may be dilapidated, with another building which is not of the countryside. Even though it may be smaller, it may be brand new and it sort of looks good, that's actually the wrong comparison because what we are dealing with is in terms of policies here. And clearly we do think about, how people live, their living conditions, and there's appropriate policies for that. But the weighting, which we as the local authority have given here, is in terms of protecting the countryside. So it's valid in that particular sense, These are this is a countryside, these are agricultural buildings which have, through government legislation, fairly recent legislation, they've got the opportunity to change these buildings, That's what's happened in here. They were able to demonstrate that and do that. What we're now doing is we're now adding to that. We're now with a fairly extensive extension. I mean, it may be smaller than the agricultural building, but when you look at it in context of the building that's there at the moment, it's quite substantial. It is a significant extension. It's quite visible from the street in terms of what it is, not in terms of comparing it with the agricultural building. And I mean, that's what we have to look at. And in terms of protecting our countryside, protecting these environments, that's the balance that we need to strike when we actually look at this, rather than just, it looks better than this, that sort of thing. That's not really the approach to take.
Before you come back, we do need clearer reasons for refusal as part of approval for part of
Okay, well, so I haven't
overcome the reasons.
Okay, well, I haven't got the policies in front of me, but for me, it's an effective use of land. It ties in with the rural policies to allow rural workers to stay. I know it's not got a tie on it, but for me that's still relevant. I think it's a welcome improvement to the local street scene. I think it fits in well with the local street scene. And I mean, you know, being a country person who was born in the countryside, who's lived in the district in the countryside, for us, for me, I know we'll disagree, but for me as a country person who's always been in the countryside, we welcome these additions and we welcome these changes. You know, we get told we have to approve big housing estates, but for me as a country person, we like the continuity, and I like the design. I think it fits in really well, and that's why, on the balance of the decision, I think the benefit outweighs the harm to allow a local family to stay here, and it is difficult in the countryside, and I think it ties in beautifully.
Do you still second that? Sorry, I'm talking to Councillor Keys. Do you still support that? Councillor Morgan?
I was just going to back up Councillor White's point and perhaps be more specific. I believe it is sustainable. I believe that it contributes to the policy of prosperous rural communities. And as regarding design quality and the built environment, you're actually going to end up with something that's going to look better than it probably does at the moment. So I think wholeheartedly that this should be.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, and
I actually know this site fairly well because when Thomas misses his bus, I have to hare along here down to Hatfield Peveril. So I'm afraid I disagree with Miss Ward's assessment about the scale and bulk and height. I don't agree with that. And following on from others' comments, I just can't see the harm here. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens?
I think I was about to say the same thing, really. And what swings it for me is that the barn is going to come down. And so it seems to me that there's a direct payoff there. And overall, I would say the benefits, because the barn is coming down, I would say overall the benefit does outweigh the harm. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I've got Councillor Keys, you Councillor Siddle. But I'm not entirely sure. Does that mean the barn could or couldn't come back later?
Well, but look at the description of the development. It's change of use of land to residential and single-storey side extension. That's what's in front of us.
Okay.
They may say that they're pulling down the barn. There's no obligation to pull down the barn, unless I'm mistaken somewhere, Nicola. But in terms of the description of development, it just says the change of use of land to residential. So what we're looking at here is in terms of, again, just residential creep into the countryside. This is effectively what the position is.
But it could be conditioned, presumably, that the barn must come down, as opposed to the plan is that the barn will come down.
Well, that's not what they've proposed. So we can't condition that they pull down the barn. If that's not what they proposed, that's not what's been assessed.
That's worrying.
I mean, it may be an intention. I mean, but that's not what's in front of us.
Right, I've got Councillor Keys and Councillor Siddle, but what worries me about this is that it's come back after refusal without changing. And I'd feel a lot happier about it if some of those aspects were changed, or had been changed, I should say. Councillor Keys.
We keep on about the President's set, and Councillor Siddle and myself had can you put the picture of the barn up? I know they said that might not be come down, but in our ward, we had a better built barn at Plains Road knocked down and two properties passed. And that was a lot better built than that. That was a brick built structure. Well, that's certainly not. So if they say the President's set, you keep on about that. We've had it in Great Tottenham.
Councillor Siddle?
Thank you. So could the officers make it clear that at the moment, the whole of this plot is designated as agricultural land? Is that correct?
There is a prior approval, Cooper, approval, which is obviously why they're living there at the moment. So there is that permission. That's how the building is being used, but that relates only to that building.
So
any curtilage around it would be, strictly speaking, tightly defined.
Okay. Yeah, in terms of in terms of that, I can understand the officers saying that we are changing the use of the land from agricultural to residential. So that's again another precedent that we would be setting by passing this application.
Well, I would, and in addition to that, I would say that this is probably even a worse situation than the application we considered before, because this concerns the whole of the site, the entirety of the site.
In terms of the bulk and design, I don't think it is bulky. I don't think we can define the extension as bulky. In terms of its impact, it's going to be something small and weatherboard and not particularly intrusive. However, it's the fact that Councillor Thompson's just said this is no different to what came to us before, but it wasn't delegated last time. And again, what precedent are we setting? Yeah, and I can understand the applicant and I can understand their situation. However, we have to take into account when we make decisions at this committee, planning policy and the effect that it has on the whole of the district and not just on this one particular site. So yes, I can see that it's, I can see, to me, it's not bulky. However, it's about that change. The site on Plains Road was a business site, not an agricultural site. So it was designated as business premises and it was a brownfield site. So it is completely different to this particular application. We weren't on that application saying that we were changing agricultural land to residential. We were changing a business site to a residential site. So again, I have this concern about what we are doing and the decisions that we are making here tonight that have an effect on the wider district and other applications. I have every empathy for the applicants, but that is my concern.
Yeah, and I think it's useful just to remind ourselves of the site we're dealing with. If you want to just scroll down to the site location plan, I mean, it's we are talking about a have we got that there?
There you go.
I mean, it's a fairly substantial area in a prominent position where we're changing from effectively agricultural to residential. That's what we're dealing with.
No, I actually think,
This is not a slither of land. Sorry to say that, but
I think it's a bit more than a sliver, which is, I have immense sympathy for the applicants. And I have a feeling there's an application out there somewhere that, for this site, that I could very likely support, but I am struggling with this one and the barn not necessarily going. Actually, that's my main problem. I mean, it isn't an open site by anybody's standards. I agree with Councillor Siddle. I really don't think that, that's excessive in bulk and design. I know we normally expect an extension to be subservient, but how do you make an extension that's subservient to something that's quite as small as that? Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask Mr Johnson if they could put in for a Cooper on the barn behind, couldn't they? And then what does... No, that the house, the building they're in at the moment was presumably allowed by a Cooper. So the barn behind that is agricultural. So they could go for a Cooper on that as well, couldn't they? And then what does that do to the whole site there then?
the only thing I could say is that that's not what's in front of us. And I think that's kind of veering our thoughts away from the matters at hand. It's almost like saying, well, if they can do that, and then by following the regulations, the law, you know, they get change of use to residential on all these buildings, then why not give it now? That's not what's in front of us. That's not what we're dealing with. We need to just deal with what's in front of us. If that particular, I mean, it would be very difficult in any event, because there's a lot more, given the dilapidated state of that building and the criteria that needs to be met, that they would have to satisfy in any event, yeah? But that aside, we just need to focus on, again, with all respect here, what's in front of us here. And what's in front of us here is the change of use of the entire site at this point of time, contrary to our planning policies. And that's what's the issue here. At least if it's the legislation, there's not a lot we can do about that. Yeah, that's not our policies.
Sorry, Councillor White.
Sorry, just one quickie. The building, if it's to the north, looks like to the north on that map. Is that a house? And is that all garden? The one above it?
Sorry,
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So this is residential, and this is residential here, and then the neighbouring property here is residential.
So it's half the size, probably, of the one above it that's all residential. Yeah. Well, in that case, then I stand by my proposal, and I'd like to ask the go for vote.
So again, just to clarify, that's just the extension. We're talking about the entire use of the site. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, if that may have been residential historically, but that to me is not the issue that we have here. That site stands on its own. If that's what it's used, that's its use. Yeah, this is a particular use which is protected by policies and it's in a prominent position.
Councillor White, could you just turn your microphone off for a second? Right, Councillor Morgan, I think that.
I would just make the point that it is being used as a residential at the moment. The people are living there. There is not going to be any farming activity going on in that place. It is, as you say, within the residential area. And by allowing this application to go through, you're going to end up with a much pleasanter and nicer spot there than you have at the moment, and somewhere to bring children up indeed.
Okay, I think it's time to go to the vote. It was Councillor White's proposal with reasons for over. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hughes, you wanted to come? You're still second. That's what I thought you meant. I realised I shouldn't have assumed. Councillor Stevens.
So did we have the reasons?
Can you just rehearse those reasons?
Yeah, I think it's an effective use of land. I think it's an improvement on the street scene. I think that it also affords all the rural policies that were allowing rural communities to thrive and expand. They are rural workers. I think it fits in perfectly with our rural area. It's small, it's unobtrusive, and by the removal of the dilapidated buildings, I really think it'll improve the countryside. So on the balance of planning, in my opinion, as a country person, I think this is a welcome addition to the countryside.
So,
You haven't covered change of use of agricultural land?
I just have to make a comment, because while you're then making the argument about the rural use and all the rest of it, yeah, that's not what's in front of us. This will be residential. There will be no obligation for them to, for example, if there were an application, we're talking about policy H7 and the rural type, this is not that. There is no obligation on them with this. This is just basically residential, bit of Walden.
Simply then, effective use of land and an improvement on the street scene.
Sorry, I don't like to be picky, but you have to address everything that's in these reasons for refusal, these suggested reasons for refusal, and that includes changing it from agricultural land, the whole site.
Okay, I think that the change of use from agricultural to residential is like the previous application. It's not big enough to farm. I don't think it's suitable for farming. I don't agree. I think that the scale, mass and bulk is within keeping with the area. I don't think it is obtrusive, and that's all I think to say, really.
Okay. There you have it. Still duly seconded? Right. Councillor, no, this really is the last go, because I think we must have said most things. Councillor Stevens.
I would just like to point out that in amongst the reasons there, I heard that it's going to improve the street scene. And as you've said, there's no guarantee that barn will come down, and that's what would improve the street scene. Nothing else really would improve the street scene. We've heard that we can't condition it. And
sorry, I didn't.
I think that if we can't condition the barn coming down, which would have swung it for me, I think, because I think all the other things that you've said do have absolute merit. But I am still, as I was in the previous application, extremely concerned about converting things over to residential domestic use from agricultural use. I think it's a dangerous precedent. Doesn't matter that it's only a little pocket of land, because that opens the doors to people saying, oh, well, I'll just sort of annex this bit and this bit and this bit, and then, oh, they'll have to say yes to it. I don't think we want to go down there. Thank you.
Yeah, my main concern is we might not get what we think we're getting, and no matter how, no matter what the integrity of these applicants, you can't speak for what's going to happen 50, 100 years down the road. and the planning will still apply. So I do need to put this to the vote. Those in favour of Councillor White's 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? That application is passed on as discussed and noted.
Just say that both of these sites already have residential use on them. They're not virgin agricultural land. That's probably something I should have said earlier. You know, it's not like it's a bare field.
Too late, I'm afraid. We've voted. So, thank you. And moving on, we have this.
Sorry, Chair, can we just confirm conditions?
Oh. Anything standard plus delegate. Yeah.
What's already there, so it's in keeping with.
Well, the design, yes, it's all that is a given. And if you can find a way of ensuring we get rid of the barn. What can you say? Okay, now we've got item 8, which is land opposite 34 Hall Road, and again I refer you to the update because there is this recommendation to refuse, which is snuck in sneakily, yes, snuck in sneakily. So I think this might actually be fairly quick. I'm hoping for the best here.
Would you mind doing the honest one, please?
Going to do the so we are in fact recommending that I'll put it, since this is a political thing really. Local planning authority resolves the applicant's submission is treated as a request to voluntarily vary the existing section 52. Is anybody listening? Yeah, well, the recommendation is to agree with the request, which was in fact backed up by our legal services, lead specialist legal.
You want to say much or?
Oh, yeah, why not? You are in fact the ward member, and you know a lot about it, and it goes back. It goes back since.
Yeah, so it does go back to 1984, and this bit of land was originally gravel pits, and back in 1984 there was the section 52, which was the law at the time, which is now out of date in terms of the law, and as part of the agreement back in the 1980s, the playing field cricket pitch was given to the village in return for granting 6 houses to be built on this particular land, even though there was a section 52 protecting that land. So there was that precedent was set. That went on for an awful long time. Several people owned the land and tried to appeal it, and went through a long-winded process. In 2017, outline planning permission was given for this particular site, which was one appeal, but then we had this section 52, which then went to a land tribunal, where nobody apart from the legal representation from the council was allowed to go and talk. Nobody from the village was allowed to go and talk. And at that land tribunal, the judge decided that it was right to pass a planning application. However, the section 52 still applies to this particular bit of land, and the landowner is now asking for that particular bit of section 52 on this parcel of land to be removed, but in the remaining parcels of land that they will still be protected. And that's the crucial element of this particular thing, that we still have the legal protection on those other parcels of land,
Including the
cricket pitch, and the land that is a boundary to this, in terms of creating a boundary to, a buffer, so that things hopefully could never be built on. Who knows? But yeah, that
was the intention for this piece of land.
It was exactly, and 30 years later. So hopefully, I don't think we have really a choice in this. It's my opinion.
I mean, I think one of the key things are obviously it would need to go through its due process. Yeah. If it were with this part of the land, it's quite clear. As I said, planning permission on appeal and all the rest of it. The land tribunal. we had a legal opinion when this came to members back in 2018. The lie of the land has changed in terms of development and that sort of thing, and whether the Section 52 intentions have any place in today's society for, you know, developing land and the need for housing and that sort of thing. Yeah. But it, as Councillor Siddle said, it just relates to the application site and not beyond that. This is really a formality because they have approval through the Land Tribunal, but the documentation relates to the appeal scheme. So really, as I sort of said in the report here, it's really a change of the reference. Yeah. They can still go ahead and build it if they want, but you know, legally, when you're doing whatever you do as a house builder, it's to get all your papers in order, and that piece of paper is not in order in terms of what they can build on the site and the legality. So that's what's in front of us, and it's not. It's an agreement, which is why, as you said, it seems pretty strange. It's a voluntary agreement to say, okay, we can change it, but within that is the assurances, yeah, that it will remain as per the Land Tribunal decision.
I was about to ask for a seconder to agreeing that. Is that what you were going to do?
No.
Oh, well, if you have a piece to say, please.
So I think the other thing that we need to be concerned about this, or we need to be aware about this, is if we do refuse it, then we're going to go down some illegal process, which is going to cost us money, and I don't think we need to be doing that at this time. So that's the other reason I think that it's important that we take the right decision at this particular time.
In that case, I'm looking for a proposal. Would somebody? Well, let's have a proposal. Then you can debate the proposal. You don't have to debate it in advance. Oh, Councillor Siddle, you've fully grasped the subject.
So I would like to forward a recommendation that we agree to the request. Is really what we're.
Councillor Keys seconding that. Councillor White.
Yeah, I'll agree to that. Well, I think what I wanted to say is that we have this massive fight to approve individual houses. And yet when it comes to something that's really, really controversial, we've been fighting for donkey's years. It's the same old thing that we have to approve it because of the decisions made that appeal and legal decisions. And I just find this really difficult on a personal level, which is why we're members, because it's our personal opinions in line with legislation. And yes, we have to agree. I accept that. But it doesn't mean I have to like it. Whereas the previous application I had no objections to. This one, because of the way it was set up, I do have objections to. But we're between a rock and a hard place. We've got nowhere to go. We have to agree the recommendation, sadly.
This isn't anything to do with planners or planning. This is to do with the Land Tribunal.
But it facilitates the planning.
Councillor Keys seconded that. We have a formal proposal, duly seconded. Those in favour, pause up, please.
Sadly.
Yeah. So, next item.
The only thing I would just say is that our part as planners in this process is only because the documentation is a planning documentation, and it's us editing it.
Yeah.
The Land Tribunal can't edit the document.
No, I fully accept that. But it's just really frustrating, you know. But
sorry. Moving on. Item, I think it was 9, is any other items of business the chairman considers are urgent. You'll be grateful to hear there are none. And I therefore, with thanks to members and officers and anyone else who's still there, close the meeting at 9:38.
And I'd like to thank the chairman for indulging us in our talking. So thank you very much.